Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about nested loops, right? And we can nest anything in Java. We can nest conditionals, if statements. We can nest loops. We can nest anything we want. So let's talk about what that means, nested loops. Basically, what that means is I'm going to put a loop inside another loop. So let's do that. Let's say for int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 10. Right? I plus plus, right? And in this loop, if I just printed this out, right, I plus I, right, I would get a list from 1 to 10, right? Let's run this, and you'll see I get 1 to 10. Okay, so you should be pretty good with this so far. Now, let's say I want to nest a loop inside this loop. So let's say I wanted to print out, or I wanted another loop inside here, int j equals 1, j is less than or equal to 5, j plus plus, right? And in here, I'm going to put another. Okay. So let's see what's going to happen here. So the first time, and let's print out I and j, right? I, comma, j, right? So I, and then plus, quote, comma, plus j. So we're going to print out I and j here. So let's see what happens. I come into this, and I is 1, right? Then I go into this loop, and j is 1. So it's going to execute this. Then it's going to drop to the end of that loop, which is this, and now j is 2, so it's going to come back up to this inner loop. It's going to implement this whole inner loop each time. So now j is 2, so when it prints this out, I is still 1, but now j is 2. Then it's going to drop to the bottom of that inner loop, and now j is 3, and it's going to come up to the top of the inner loop, and 3 is still less than or equal to 5, so it'll now print out I is still 1, but j is 3, and it's going to continue to do this. It's going to come back through. I is 1, now j is 4, then I is 1, now j is 5, but then it's going to get to the bottom, and it's going to increment j to be 6, which means it's not going to meet this condition, and it's going to drop out of this loop to here. Now it's going to increment I. I was 1, so it's going to come back up, right? Now I is 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. Now it's going to enter this for loop brand new this time. So j is going to get initialized to 1 again. And it's going to execute this inner loop 5 times and then drop out and then come back up to this top loop. Now I is 3. Then it's going to enter this j loop as a new loop. So j will be 1. It'll go 1 to 5. So how many times is it going to do this? It's going to do 5 times for every 1 time of the outer loop, which is 10. So it's actually going to run this 50 times. So if I ran through this code, right, you'll see, right, if I scroll, first it was 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. So that executed the inner loop 5 times. Then it dropped out of the inner loop and went to the outer loop and made I2. And then it did the inner loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then the outer loop. And it did this all the way up to 10 for the outer loop, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the inner. And then once that happened, it dropped out of the outer loop and it ended, right? So this is considered a nested loop. Very useful. Again, you can see how things get out of hand very quickly with loops. But, you know, this is very useful. Let's say we were going to make a multiplication table. Let's make a multiplication table, right? So we could almost use this, except instead of hard coding numbers in here, I'm going to actually say that I'm going to create constants at the top, right? So to do that, so I'm going to say final, right? That's a constant int. Let's do how many rows we want, row max. And I'm going to make it, 10, right? Let's do 10 by 10, right? Okay. And then I'll do a final int column max, right? This is a multiplication table, right? 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2, right? You get it. Okay. equals 10, right? So now we have COMAX. So I'm going to use the outer loop for my rows. So I'm going to do it less than or equal to row max. And I'm going to do the inner one for columns, right? Now, what do I want to actually do in each of these things, right? So in the first one, I'm actually going to print out the value of I, right, on a line, right? So right in here, I'm going to print out, right, system.out.print. Now I'm going to use printf because I want to make sure everything lines up. And I'm going to use 4 spaces, for everything. And if you're not sure how printf works, go watch my printf tutorial. But I'm going to use 4D to indicate that I'm using an integer, right? And I'm just going to print out I on that line. Now remember, printf is not going to put a new line in there. It's just going to wait after those 4 spaces. And then every time inside the loop, again, I'm not going to use a print line. I'm going to use a printf, right? I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use 4 spaces each time. And I'm going to put I times j. Remember, this is a multiplication table, right? So I'm going to do I times j. So I'm going to multiply the values of I and j and print that out in 4 spaces, right? And then every time I go through every time my inner loop finishes, right? Every time it finishes, I want to print a blank line, right? So I'm just I'll do it an easy way. I'll just print a blank line that way. So what's this going to do? The first time it's going to print the value of I, and then every time through it, it's going to print I times j, right? So I'm going to have a multiplication table set up like that. So let's run this code and see what happens, right? So here's my multiplication table, right? I can see 1 times 2 is, you can blow this up, right? 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 6 times 6, right, is right over here, is 36, right? So it's a quick way of creating a multiplication table. 10 times 10 is 100, right? So nested loops. Again, you can do more things than create a multiplication table, but I thought that was a pretty quick and easy thing to do using nested loops.